What is going on in longevity and aging research?
You keep mentioning back in the days. I mean, the first study about the doubling lifespan, I went to the library, right? I digged up the paper, right? And I read it there. And then I was so amazed. And I had it and, I really wanted to keep it. So I wanted to.
In this episode number 69, I have a conversation with Professor Collin Ewald from the ETH Zürich. By 2030, almost every fourth person will be 65 or older in Switzerland, Europe, and the United States. Science is just now beginning to better understand the root cause of aging and dying, and any disease that we can understand is one that will eventually be cured. Professor Ewald is head of the Extracellular Matrix Regeneration Laboratory at the ETH Zürich. Collin has a long-standing interest in the molecular biology of healthy aging and age-related pathologies. He is the founder and currently the president of the Swiss Society for Aging Research. He has received multiple awards, including NYAS Future Entrepreneur, recognized by the New York Academy of Sciences, and is named under the top 1,000 longevity leaders worldwide and the top 15 longevity influencers in Switzerland. Questions we will discuss in the episode. What is the role of extracellular matrix during aging and longevity? Where is currently the innovation for longevity drug discoveries done? What aging research is going on in the world? And what is the Swiss Society of Aging and Longevity Research? And much, much more. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to a new episode of the Beginner's Mind podcast. Today with a very special guest from a beautiful country in Europe, from Switzerland. Welcome to the show, Collin Ewald. Willkommen in the show, Collin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Collin, how is life in Switzerland these days?
We have at the moment beautiful weather. It's cold. There used to snow, and there are lots of snow on the ski slopes. So if you want to go skiing, it's fantastic. Of course, with the corona, there's a lot of lockdown, and unfortunately, the situation is going again to getting more and more isolated, which is a pity. But I think we handled it before, and so I'm pretty optimistic we're going to handle the new wave again, and then hopefully life is going to be more social again in the spring.
I hope so too. In spring, there is the Bio Europe in Switzerland. I think it's in Basel this year, and it would be nice to travel there to see this area again.
Yeah, it's true. Also for us scientists, we had lots of meetings online or via Zoom, which was a lot, right? And everybody got tired now of it. So everybody is eager to meet and mingle. And we had a couple of meetings that were hybrid, and we were able to meet and exchange ideas. It's just different when you can really exchange ideas, talk to somebody informally, right? And, it's completely different. It's a different dynamic. It's a different feedback. And we are very social animals, so we love to chat over dinner or, a beer or so to come up with really great ideas.
I couldn't agree more. The last conference I attended before the pandemic was in October 2019 abroad. Then I had an event in January 2020 here in Vienna. It was a panel discussion, and then nothing. And it was so refreshing in October to attend at least one conference here in Vienna. It's the EFIP. And I cannot agree more to say we are social animals. So seeing people and talking with people in person has a different dynamic than doing it via Zoom. Collin, the EFIP was a very good conference. in which I heard that there is a lot of research going on in areas that I usually don't work in. I come from drug development and help scientists since 2006 to move the drugs through the development process and partner it with the pharma industry. And mostly it was about curing disease. And at the FIP, I learned that there is a lot of research going on in the food industry and also in the health industry. And the interesting thing is that these few topics that pop up constantly now on my social media feed, it's longevity, aging, and a word that I like that I found on your website, it's the health span. These are three topics that I like since I was a young boy. So back in the 80s, I had one core question, and this was why are some people achieving a very old age and in absolute 100% health, while others are on the opposite side and have cancer, heart attacks, and any kind of diseases already in their 40s or 30s. And the answers I got were a little bit divided. Some said it's God's will. Others blamed the life situation and life circumstances. So I went on a little quest, and maybe I didn't look very well enough towards science, but in the 80s, 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, before the internet, I found barely any answer in this area with a scientific background. And I found many, let's call it hints, in the martial arts area, where I saw 80, 90-year-old men basically doing things where I, as a 20-year-old young man, said, that's even impossible for me. How can they do that with 80, 90 over there? So I'm really curious now to hear from you what's going on in this area in research in the labs when we talk about longevity, aging, and health span.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's fantastic that the subject reaches a lot of people. I mean, it's just the beginning. For me, I mean, it's old news, right? I mean, I started my scientific inquiry in aging research 20 years ago. So again, I had the similar question like you. I observed that some people are super healthy and other ones are not. And what is the difference there? That was just the back of the mind. But then when I went to university, there was a study coming out that a single mutation in a single gene was able to double the lifespan of an organism. So this organism is a little worm, 1 millimeter in size. It's called C. elegans. And that gene was called DAF2, right? So in 1993, Cynthia Canyon, had a very nice Nature paper about this. And that was not only, the most mind-blowing part to me, because, I mean, of course, aging is super complex. There are lots of things happening. Then if you think about it, it's crazy that you can have just one gene or one single mutation that can double the lifespan, right? So that's mind-blowing. But to me, going to university, looking at and studying molecular biology and all those pathways and biochemistry, the cool thing to me was actually that this mutation in this DAF2 to double the lifespan depending on a second gene called DAF16. And so this suggests that that's under genetic regulation, right? And so this opened up a whole new game for the aging research, because now we had something to really to tackle it. We had a tool to look at it in a model organism, and we could actually do biochemical assays. We could do all the science assays, all those soft things we couldn't do before, right? Which is, better sport, better nutrition. Here we can go really to the molecular players, and that, opened up the whole new field. And then people got into also then more with research in mice and other model organisms, and we try and we decipher the genetic underpinnings, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot to learn, but we learned a lot in the last 20 to 30 years. And now the shift is actually what's the exciting part, is that we it's a young field and we learned a lot. And now it's at a time where we could start thinking about developing drugs, going into biotech and bring it to the market and to the people. And so that's why you start hearing it, because, we are trying to move into the innovation into drug development. And also then we're trying to move it into clinical trials. I mean, we have a lot of things proven in model organism, in basic research, but then the question is how well it will hold up in us humans. And we're just starting it, and it will take a long time. But I'm very confident that we going there. And at the moment, as I mentioned, it's pretty exciting.
It's very interesting to hear that. I'm coming from the other direction, where genetic always seemed to me it's pretty much fixed, so you can't do anything against it. And I was looking on the side of lifestyle, of habits, of how that influences aging. But there was one question that I never got a real good answer. Maybe you have one, and maybe I just give it a try and ask it to you. Can you explain to me in simple terms what the scientific point of view on aging is? What is aging? Is it a disease? Is it a natural process? What is that?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I just can take you my working model, my understanding of aging. So to me, aging is simply the physiological decline of function, right? So your heart functions less, your liver, all your internal organs, right, decline. And that just goes about it. And then you ask your question, like, why would things decline after the age of, say, 40 or 50, right? And it's basically because, natural selection, which is the driver of evolution, right, doesn't care what happens to you after you have technically reproduced. So meaning, natural selection cares about you growing fast and, you being fit in the sense that you can, reproduce. So that's all it cares about. But what happens to you with your body after reproduction, natural selection doesn't care. So meaning that there are two things going on. So one thing is that genes that are good for you when you're young to grow, for example, the DAF2 gene, which is the insulin IGF-1 receptor, right, which is very important for growth. It's good till you, get older, and then it's not switched off, and it's like a compost, like it's a molecular compost. It just goes all different ways. It's just not regulated anymore. And so that's one thing. And then if things are not regulated correctly anymore, then things are also not repaired, because you are constantly exposed to toxins, to UV, to other things that damage your molecules inside the cells, like your DNA, your proteins, right? And so when you're young, you're very well equipped to repair it, right? So you have all this machinery repaired. But if, with aging, if that declines, and you're not repairing your stuff so good, it accumulates damage, and then it also leads to system failure, right?
At one point in time.
One point of time, right? And then the other aspect, the last aspect what I want to mention to you is saying, if it's all, natural, or is it just happening? The thing is, what's very curious, if you look at bacteria, which are just single cells, right? They also age. And so the way they age, actually, they grow when they have a certain cell size, they divide, right? And then they split off, right? But the thing is that when they divide, there's a so-called mother cell, which takes all the damaged proteins and DNA that are there, it keeps it and only gives the good one away to the next one, right? So meaning that this one original cell, right, one starts to age because it accumulates all that damage. And so that already suggests to you that aging itself was an invention in biology that just happened, right? And since that so early in evolution happened, we all age, right? Which is, it's just, to me, again, if I come back, to me, it's just something intrinsic in us that's happening. And that's why I also, aging as a disease, I mean, it depends who you talk to and what they want to do, what they want to do with it. Because, if you say aging is not a disease, then you have a very hard time to do all these clinical trials, right? And if you say aging is a disease, then you have something to actually do the drug developments to do those trials. So it really depends what you want, what's your standpoint on this, and what is needed. But technically, it's more or less, to me, it's semantics, because the intrinsic biology, as I mentioned, it's just in us. And since, probably that ancestor cell survived, had this intrinsic aging mechanism in there, this is how we evolved, and we have to deal with it, unfortunately. But the cool thing is, since this is so ancient, you could study the basic fundamentals in model organisms, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all the same. And so that makes it, again, cool to get some insights, how it works and how could we address it.
I think this is a very interesting point. I would like to come up with another unusual question. When we look at, to just build a little bit on this, aging might be a disease and maybe it's curable, and to test the hypothesis that I got from the internet, from YouTube, from some investors. In the last year, I asked myself very often, what's with the usual dangers in life? So I'm 47, and at some point in time I will age and life will go away. And I started looking on the average lifespan of the human race. And I found with Wikipedia and other sources that probably in the Stone Age, 47 was a very unusual age, a high age, and people died mostly in their 20s to 30s. So the average lifespan that I found was 32. And with the Industrial Revolution, it seemed to go up. So to 70, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And some investors claim that they think it's even possible to achieve 100, 200, 300, 400 years of age with the right treatment. From your scientific perspective, do you really think that's possible to go from an average of 20, 30 years in Stone Age up to maybe in 50 years, 100, 200, 300 years?
Let me first give you a little bit more perspective, because the numbers you just mentioned here, if you think about it, for like 4 million years, right? You're right, the average age was 20 and it went up to 31. So 11 years in 4 million years, right? Life expectancy increase. But then the last 115 years, it was from 31 to 71. So 40 years life expectancy increase, which is a doubling in lifespan. Now, the question is that what you mentioned, the science field is really divided, where it's possible to go over the age of 120 or 115, right? I mean, the world record is Sean Galmard with 122 years. But you see mostly these supercentenarians, so people over 100, and if you reach 110, it's called supercentenarian. It's usually for men around 110 and for women 115 or 17 or something like that, right? And so there's, lots of different papers coming out on this to calculate where it's possible, where it's even possible for your molecular machinery to go there. And, lately, there has been a real change, at least in, if you look at the cellular levels. So at the moment, we are able to reprogram cells. So meaning we could take a skin cell from you and then use 4 different factors called the Yamanaka factors, and we could reprogram it. So it's going to be like Z0 again, so to speak, on the epigenetic age, right? Meaning that, technically, we're starting to see evidence that it's possible to reverse aging. So if that's possible, if you can reverse your aging of your cells a little bit, right, then technically it's possible to live up a long, long, long life. It's, I think it is possible, but I don't want to make too many claims, because what I would love to see is not, I don't want to live for like 200 years, because I would rather live, 90 years in super good health, right? And, then it could come to an end. Because I'm not sure, this is a personal decision, what you want to do, right? If you talk to elderly people, they say, déjà vu, déjà fait, and you've seen it all, right? It's just repeating and it's over the same thing again. I don't know how, how exciting it's going to be. But, we're making the progress and the science is getting there. So we could actually, not only slow the aging process, but starting to in a sense to reverse it in some extent. And so, yes, I mean, there will be an increase. And I think everybody has in the end to decide for themselves whether they want this or not.
I think that's a great point. I mean, 20, you said, a few thousand years ago. And now we have 70, 80. And I think very often we forget that, in my opinion, we live in a paradise with high probability of 70, 80, 90 years in good health. And let's stay a little bit on the macro environment. What's your opinion why that changed from 20 years up to 80, 90? Do you have a scientific perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the last 115 years, we had really cool medical breakthroughs, right? One of them is, really fighting infectious diseases, right? With antibiotics, fighting all bacterial infections, and vaccination, fighting lots of, viral infections. So that increased health and lifespan by a lot. And also then the next revolution was just simple soap. Just simply washing hands. I mean, all those, birth deaths we had was basically one factor was that, the people, when the baby got delivered, they didn't wash hands. So, a doctor comes in one operation from one thing and then delivers a baby. And of course it gets all infected. Just having soap and, hygiene just made a huge, huge difference. And also then the healthcare system, right? So basically we got rid of a lot of, early mortality, like childhood mortality, and a lot of these infectious diseases. And that increased our lifespan by a lot. And then we, of course, now with, everybody has, access to drinking water, clean drinking water, food, and whatever is needed, right? So that, there was a big change.
I also like the evolution of the internet. And this is one thought I had in the last 2 decades. When I remember the 80s, when someone with 13, 14, 15 years old wanted to learn something about lifestyle habits, it was really challenging to get the right information from the right people. When I look on the internet today, I just have to ask Google, what should I do to age in good health, and get a myriad, in my opinion, very good advices and very good book recommendations from scientists who explain in an easy to understand way how people should set up their lifestyle to have a very good probability of aging in a healthy. What do you think about these let's say, social media strategies? Do you find sound advice on the internet, or do you see it a little bit differently from the scientific standpoint?
So, I mean, the good thing is that education is a big factor in aging, right? So the more educated you are, usually correlates or is associated with a longer lifespan. Again, correlation, association is not causation, but it definitely helps to learn a lot. Now, how good the information is on these things, I don't know. You mentioned that you used Wikipedia before, right? I mean, Wikipedia is, curated by everybody, right? And so when you come in as a scientist and you want to correct certain things, Wikipedia is clearly, well, it's not for experts, right? So it's always too detailed, right? So I think it's a good starting point, right? It's a good ignition of thoughts, of thought stream, or where you want to look for information. But then I would go to some more trusted resources, right? I mean, science books are good, right? Documentaries, and then just educate yourself and be critical. Critical thinking is important, right? Does this make sense? Who is writing this, right? Where's it coming from? What's the agenda of that, author or of this person? What do they try to convey? what's their motive, and does it make sense, and how true it is, right? Could you somehow test it? I mean, it's really like a little bit the scientific approach, right? So you have these different hypotheses, see whether they hold up or not. But I mean, in general, I would recommend to read around and see something. For medical things, this usual mistake, you just read up all the different things and you think like you have all those different diseases. So I would rather go and ask a doctor, ask the experts, right? And the nice thing is nowadays, I think also with the Zoom and the social media, lots of experts are really reachable and they're happy to talk to everybody. Because I mean, at least from the academic side, right? You are funded by the government. You get grants, and the money is coming from the people. So you have an obligation as a scientist or academic person to bring back the information. What is happening with the money people actually give to you, right? What the science is driven forward, and then also communicate it back and inform the public, right?
That sound advice, and I agree 100% to that. I think Google, YouTube, Wikipedia are good starting points to find a lot of information, but in the end, it leads back to I would say, real experts who dedicate their lives to do proper research and also analyze what's working and what's not working. And this is also the way I found you. I remember that from all these questions I had, at one point in time, you popped up on my LinkedIn page. And I thought, why should I not ask you directly? Can we have a podcast episode about these topics so that I have the chance to learn more and also can really help to disseminate the information and highlight your great work in Zurich from your team. And in my opinion, the internet, when it comes to learning, teaching, and sharing information, is a blessing to the human race.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is the old school media, newspapers and radio, right? I mean, you reach the people over the age of, say, 50, right? Mm-hmm. And then the newer generation, I mean, not even watches TV anymore. It's all Netflix and all the social medias, right? It's just a different way to get your information, different sources. So they're different targeted groups, so to speak, who you're gonna talk to and targets to with the different things. And so it's just changing. Everything is changing, right? So again, there's another revolution coming in media, right?
I see that coming, but let's stay on longevity and healthy aging. What's going on in your lab? What is your research focus?
So our research focus is we first of all, we go for really basic questions, fundamental questions. We use this model organism C. elegans, as I mentioned to you, mm-hmm. And then we ask, like, what, for example, what is happening if we have the genetics the same, like they would be all twins, and if they eat all the same food in the same environment, right? Would they all age the same and they die at the same time? And the answer is no, right? Even though the genetics is the same, right? The genes that you have, and the food that they eat and the temperature exposed to and everything that is exactly the same. There are some worms that live around 15 days and other ones that live 30 days. So also doubling lifespan. And this difference in lifespan we call randomness. And it's just, scientists usually use randomness to say if they don't understand it. We clearly don't understand this. But there's a lot of randomness going on in terms of molecular programs on gene description. And we made some insights there to use this randomness in gene expression to predict how long an animal lives, right? So this is one source of question we asked. The other question we asked then is, is it even possible to extend the lifespan when you're really, really old and just about to die? Is it even possible to extend the lifespan? Because all those drugs and interventions you do, right? You want to take when you're 60, 70, right? And increase your health and lifespan. Mm-hmm. But nobody in the world has actually shown that this is impossible, because we take either we have genetic mutations that are there from birth, or we can do some interference, but these interferences are usually done when the animal is pretty young. So young adults, teenagers, right? And then they live longer. So we re-engineered CL against so that we can degrade this DAF2 gene, this insulin IGF-1 receptors. And so we could give a drug and it would just degrade that one. When we do this in young age, then, we have a doubling lifespan. And then we just aged out C. elegans till around 75% of the population has died. And this is after 21 days, right? So they age similar as us, but much faster. So after 21 days, they all have died. So if you don't do any treatment there, after 4 days, all the animals are dead. However, if you had this 75 percentile time point and we knock down the insulin IGF-1 receptor, we were able to extend the lifespan not only by a couple of days, but by 26 days. So what I'm saying is we were able, even when they're close to die, to double their lifespans, which is pretty mind-blowing, right? And so now one question in our lab is going on to figure out, like, what is happening there? Do we just extremely slow the aging process? Do we even reverse aging? Could it be like, the animals could just reverse and it's like, okay, I'm young again, and go in there? And so these are fundamental questions we're trying to attack, which could inform us like how these interventions would work and if they even convert to old age. And the last part we're actually doing is most of the aging research, because I've been a long time in the field, is focus what's happening inside of our cells, what's happening to our DNA, what's happening to our mitochondria, what's happening to our proteins. But what we focus on is what's happening outside of the cell. And so since we are multicellular organisms, we have 37 trillion cells, right? They have all to stick together and communicate with each other, right, form organs. And so there are proteins outside the cell that are called the extracellular matrix. Mm-hmm. So the extracellular matrix is this network that is interlinked together that holds your organs together. And for example, one of the big molecules there are collagens. And I'm sure you guys have heard of collagens. This is what makes if you decrease our collagens, our skin starts to wrinkle, right? And you have the skin sagging. So you see the natural process that's going on with aging with these extracellular matrix proteins. And so now we're trying to really to understand the fundamental basics, how they're molecular regulated, how they're maintained, right? Because they need to maintain. We see this in longevity interventions that they are, better maintained, they're more youthful, they look much younger from the appearance, the animals, right? And what's going on. And so we found there some really cool insights. And so that's where we try to break the ground to figure out how is it actually working for the extracellular matrix. And the second part, what we learned, what was super interesting, is that almost every intervention that increases the lifespans remodels these extracellular matrix proteins, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were thinking, like, if that's happening, then if we take drugs that increase lifespan, those drugs should also remodel the extracellular matrix, right? And so we're using now the extracellular matrix in our drug screens to predict longevity drugs. And so this is like one approach we are taking. And then we go more into like the classical machine learning, like with big data, predict things, and then go into to find new interventions that improve health and longevity.
There are three parts that I'm interested in. So let's take it step by step. I really love your passion. So you seem to be really passionate about your research. And this is so great talking with you and listening to you. You mentioned that from your animals, you doubled the lifespan by knocking out basically one receptor, if I got it right. So the first, the idea had in my mind, okay, can I come to your lab? So knock out this receptor in my body and then I can probably age up to 200, can travel the world, can travel the universe. I'm sure Elon Musk makes that possible in the next 100 years. How can you translate that into humans? Can you translate the animal trials into humans?
So, I mean, the funny thing is when we put out the research, I mean, there were like Twitter feeds going on saying, it's nowadays you don't buy when you have midlife crisis, not going to buy your Lamborghini or something like that. You're going to get, knock down the IGF-1, right? So we're working really hard to translate this to humans. Of course, it's a dangerous game because this is an essential gene. It's important for your growth, right? So if you go too hard on it, it's gonna kill you. So we are trying now to figure out a strategy, right? More or less a safe strategy that could be working in us. And so we use also for the degradation system, we have to do a different system because we cannot re-engineer you per se, right? So we're trying to find some molecules that would then link the degradation of that one, and you have to figure out which tissue would be safe enough, right, to move forward, and then probe this one first in mice again. I mean, there's some good evidence with other intervention that works. So and then go into clinical trials, and that's important. So you have to wait to see those clinical trials to come out that it's really safe and effective. Because other than that, you could do so much damage to your body, right? You think you do something good because that's the information you had that looked like very promising, but we need to first prove it, and so. Beyond it, just give us 10 years or 5 years, depending how much funding we get and how fast we can go, right?
In the audience of the podcast are many investors. So the question I have is, you talk about 5 to 10 years, 15 years, and you want to go into clinical trials. What is holding you back to jump right into it? Where is your need on that path to find a drug-able solution?
Yeah, at the moment, so as you can see, a lot of innovative things happening at the university, right? But then our game is to publish papers and to come up with new mechanisms and new things, right? So there is for a professor, there's not much incentive to move this further because the paper is out, they made a splash, the knowledge is there, right? To really go into the applied one, what you need to do as a professor is then start to spin out your research in startup companies, right? Because that's at the moment the only way, because you cannot go directly to big pharma because they say, it's too risky. I mean, you haven't shown anything. I mean, first de-risk your whole, work on the technology that is at the level, de-risk it, and then show at least in preclinical trials in some animal models, and then we might be interested in it. Before that, we're not going to go there. So yeah, you start building these startups, and so that's what also our lab is doing. We're building startups and trying to get it out. I mean, I wish it would go faster, but that's how it is. But we are there, and then we just try to work closely to move this forward, right? And so, for example, the cool thing is ETH Zürich. It's a technical university. They world class for mathematics, and all these physics and chemistry. And now they're going into medicine because they really realized how important the medical field is, and go into and what could ETH for technology university, what technology we could provide to medicine, to revolutionize medicine. And so the idea is then also to use new technical innovation, combine that with drug discovery refining to really go and move this forward together as a startup into a university setting, and then have it maybe at the point where it's getting interesting for big pharma to move it forward. Because if you want to go into clinical trials, that you cannot do as a little startup. I mean, but that's basically at the moment the way I see to move this forward and to spin out the things and bring it really to the people.
Did you already create some spin-outs?
So yeah, I co-founded a supplement company, which some technology is coming out from our lab, right? So we have some supplements. That is the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, because supplements that are not regulated, which is also bad because you could lots of damage to you, right? And so the idea is to really go science proven things and supplements. And so we have something, I cannot talk about it because we're patenting at the moment, but once it's out, I'm happy to share more, but it's something really cool and beneficial. And so that's the first step, right? So we'll go with supplement, and then going to biotech. I'm trying to build something at the moment, but it takes time, and it's also biotech, as you know much better than I do. It's very tough, right, to go in there. So I'm still learning there, but I'm trying to surround myself with very knowledgeable people. Again, I go and bother other experts to help to pull this off, because I think we've done some really cool stuff. I really want to bring out to move it forward.
Startup world in drug discovery, drug development was historically a tough thing, especially in Europe, because the funding is scarce. I'm in this field now since 2006. I also had an eye on supplements, but as you said, there are a lot of things on the market where I miss a little bit the scientific background. And as it is on the food track, it's interesting what's possible on the European market still. The minute you say it's food supplements, that's fine. The situation luckily changed a little bit in the last 2 years. And I think especially with this is the good thing in the pandemic, in my opinion, that politicians and investors outside of the classical drug development area realized how important that part is. And what I see since March 2020 is that more and more people get interested in funding innovation, especially when it comes to longevity, also aging. And I think it's the right time for you and your team to look for investors and look for co-founders that help you move things forward.
Yeah, we are doing this. Again, from the academic side, I will not get rewarded, but my reward is to bring something out there that will help people make an impact, right? Really translate the aging research, so to speak. I think it's got much better. It's just, it's great.
I think it can create a nice ecosystem so that reinforces the research and is spinning out constantly ideas that are worth, let's say, investigating if there is possibility to develop products with it that help people, and with the cash flows that come back to science, you can then improve also your scientific team, have more resources. So I think this can be really a nice value chain that moves forward.
Yeah, and I think also, the university is starting to recognize this, right? With the tech transfer, that changed also a lot. And I think there's going to be lots of different things we should try to move forward. For example, I just can tell from my experience, we're doing these supplements, right? But I, as a scientist, want to know whatever product we make, I want to test back in my lab, right? So I want to test, blinded, completely blinded. Is that what is really in the pill in there? Is that extending the lifespan, right? Is that functional, right? And so I think it's going to be good for any spin-off coming out of a university to keep those connections and have some independent validation that it's really it's high quality because just on the chemical structure, but then is it really effective, working, safe, and things on. So I think there's going to be much more crosstalk, and I think the university is also not afraid anymore to do this.
Yeah, this is good news, because this is the magic I always saw in this field. You have big pharma that is very well suited to bring products to patients. It's a nice engine, logistics solved, and there is enough money there. Then you have the universities, especially here in Europe. They are perfect. So they have great scientists, they have great resources and great funding. And when I see what comes out of Europe and also other areas like North America and Asia, I think science is moving forward at hyper speed now and creating more and more knowledge. But this field in between was pretty empty. So there were only a few people. And now I really love hearing from both sides that they put in efforts to come closer together. Because as you said, I think these two sides of one coin, that on one hand you develop products, on the other hand you always go back to the scientists and say, okay, what's really working, what is the solution here, what can we leave out, and what do we have to reinforce. It's a great approach.
Yeah, hopefully, that will move forward like this. I mean, everything is aligned. I think everything is aligned. It's just it also needs, from both sides, people that are willing to do this, right, and also go the extra mile and jump over it. Again, as I mentioned, there's no incentive for academic research to do all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing is to for business people to work with scientists, which is also not easy because the mindset is completely different, right? I mean, it's really like when you start. I mean, I have the biggest respect. I'm starting with these very smart business people. It's just they think completely different, which is refreshing. But you have to put a lot of effort into it to understand it, and the other way around. For the business people to understand the scientists, like what is the scientist talking about, these technical details. I mean, yeah, it's also, but I think it's coming from both sides that people are willing to do this. And the last thing I want to mention there is also that, from the university, I mean, we have lots of smart people coming to study, right? They do an undergrad program and they do a master's. Some of them do a PhD. But university has always been geared towards, you do a PhD and then you do another training and then you become a professor. But this is only 1% of those people, right? And so there's lots of potential is lost. Lots of smart people are just, lost. And I think what also is starting to change is that to say, like, for train for other careers opportunity, right? For example, I have a course how to translate basic findings in research, right, in aging molecular biology into like startup companies, right? So it's starting to learn a little bit of mindset in there, and it's fun to interact and get everybody in. Also VCs to talk about their perspective or people have done startups. So this is one option, and then another option would be to go into politics, right? To also, as you mentioned, their policy making has to be changed, and things change now because also of the corona epidemic, people saw how important science is, right? And everybody learned now what the mRNA is and what the vaccine is, right? And so it went more into the public domain, right? Which, I hope we could do also differently to educate people and to bring people closer to it. So
I think everything is moving in the right direction. As you mentioned, the mindset, I think also the acceptance from both sides and the understanding that there are different mindsets is something that gained more and more awareness in the last 2 decades. It was different, in my opinion, 20 years ago. Also, the communication is much better about these different approaches. And looking on the public side, it was very interesting to see how things evolved in the last 18 months. When someone asked me 2 years, 3 years ago, what are you doing for making a living? And I said, drug development, there was no reaction. And people didn't even think about asking what that is. So it was like, yeah, no, you're not interested. And now, when I talk with people, many people have a basic understanding of how drug development works, what clinical phases are, what's necessary to put a drug on the market, why science is important, why we need that. And so I think it's basically moving in the right direction. Let's jump a little bit back to your research because there are 2 other topics open that I would like to understand a little bit better. You mentioned the term extracellular matrix and its role in aging. Can you give me a little bit more background information? What does that have to do with aging and longevity?
Yeah, I mean, the extra matrix per se, has not really been studied really a lot about it because, people have been looking at collagens, as I mentioned, these proteins that are outside there, and they form this network. And they also accumulate a lot of damage because this collagen can get sugar attached to it, right? And these sugar attachments then start to cross-link. And when this happens, it's like cross-linking of the matrix. So the cross-link of the matrix, you notice when you eat like some older meat versus some younger meat, right? So we see like the aged, right, old cow versus a younger cow, right? You can just from the stiffness when you chew it, you can see this cross-linking, and also it's very problematic. For example, diabetic patients who have a lot of sugar in their blood, right? If the sugar adds them to these collagens, they have, for example, problems with wound healing, right? So that's a major complications. The other thing is that, I mean, the XL matrix has been studied before, except in disease mechanisms, meaning that, for example, if collagen is produced, but just not really integrated in matrix, but just produced like a lot, which is called fibrosis, right? We usually have inflammation, some inflammatory response, and you have a lot of that, right? So fibrosis is, at least in the US, there was one study suggesting it's, 45% of all deaths is due to fibrosis, right? And so if you understand the regulation of the XM matrix or the deregulation or things go wrong, then you can attack that. And the last part that is also very important is for cancer, right? So each cancer cells, they just change the XM matrix, so they make the stiffness, they change everything, and then when this cancer starts wants to migrate, right, to metastasize, it has to break the XM matrix. So there's a strong interactions there. And the real cool thing is what we found and others found in our research is that we can tell you what cancer type it is just based on the XM matrix, because each of them forms a new matrix. And it gets even more complicated that the inside and the outside are very well connected. So your cells are attached to the matrix with some receptors, right? Mm-hmm. And so they can pull on it. They pull on the matrix, and it gives a feedback. And so there's a inside-out signaling and outside-in signaling, which really determines homeostasis, right? Mm-hmm. And so your cell. And when we look just at the XM matrix composition, we could say this cell is healthy or it's diseased, just based what it is making, right? It's such a strong interaction. We don't understand how really that works, and so we're on there, how the signaling works. But it's just remarkable how intrinsically they're linked with each other, which makes sense. I mean, we're a multicellular organism, right? And so we are trying to figure this out on a systems biological way, where we use proteomics and describe all these proteins out there and call these change in the XM matrix, we call it matriotype, which the XM matrix is the matrixome, and the snapshot of the composition of the matrix we call matriotype. And so with that, we hope to, use this also for as a biomarker for clinical investigation, so to speak. Can we use this one to say, well, this is a disease cell or a transforming cell or a healthy cell or changes there, or which cancer type there is. From the basic research, we really trying to figure out how this works, and we made some great progress in terms of longevity, right? So we know that so all these longevity interventions, going back to C. elegans, for example, they require certain key collagens to extend the lifespan. So if you can double the lifespan, certain collagens are really required for this. And the cool thing is that we can overexpress certain collagens and it's sufficient to increase lifespan. Now, if something is required and sufficient, it's suggest some sort of mechanism. And it took us 5 years now to figure out how this works, but we basically figured it out. And it is that, remember those XM matrix right out there is linked with these integrins, right? And that signal in there. And it's called, this signaling is called mechanotransduction because it transduces force measurements into the cell, because there are cables that are linked like these acting and tubules. They're linked to your nucleus and they pull on your nucleus, and that changes gene transcription. So this is this mechanotransduction. And we found this is an essential process for all these longevity interventions. And the cool thing is that not only it's from the XM matrix to the cell, but also two different organs to another XM matrix. So it's all like linked on a whole organismal level. And so what would that mean for us humans? It means that, your organs are surrounded by an external matrix, right? And so not only is the external matrix important for the stability of the organ, right? Because if that damage is happening, then the organs get damaged and that could lead to death, right? And you have to absorb a lot of shock when you jump on your knees or your back or your organs inside. You have to think they have also cushion. But also it's important that, these changes, these mechanical changes, give an information to the cell what's actually happening, and they start to remodel it, right? So if you do more exercise, then your muscle grows, the external matrix grows, right? And this is a dynamic system, and it works very well when you're young, but it's just completely also, again, decomposes when you're old. And so the key is to figure out how can we now maintain these connective tissues, these interactions. But it's the opening game, which is fun, because you can get a lot of insight with when you start an opening game.
I think there is one thing similar when I'm listening to you. Between science and entrepreneurship, both needs passion. So when you find the right people who are passionate about the same topic and you get both mindsets into that, I'm pretty sure you can translate it into products that help people. The question, I think you answered it partially, that popped up in my mind when you were talking about these pulling effects, that you get different signals back. Would that qualify for diagnostics? What's your opinion on that?
Yes, I mean, people are trying to do this. It's just reading out stiffness, right? So there's a company, I don't want to name the name, but they actually look with atomic force microscopy, go over cancer, right? And they can tell you, how malignant and these kind of things. So that's really, that is being used. I mean, currently, I think there's 11 clinical trials to tackle the stiffness of the external matrix, right? So it's going on. Yes, and I think it's coming. So it's just another, so to speak, another readout, right? I mean, there needs to be much more research done, but I think it's going to be very, very interesting in that kind of sense.
It's good. It's good to say it's in this way. It's just another readout, so it's not that problematic. We are confident that products can happen. It's good to hear that. The third part you mentioned was artificial intelligence, and what is your lab doing in that area?
Yeah. So, I mean, artificial intelligence is great to help inform you or create new hypotheses, right? And so we have different projects, but I think the most interesting one, it helps us actually for drug discovery. So we use artificial intelligence, and we do this also in collaboration with a professor from Paris, which is one of the few machine learning guys who can actually figure out what the machine is thinking, what features the machine thinks cool, right? And so when we try to do new drugs for longevity, right? We just train these neural networks to predict new drugs, but we also figure out what is it that the machine thinks that's important, right? So that is one aspect. And then we use, I mean, once you have the predicted molecule, right? You want to know whether it's safe and how can you use it and what is, all those physical or biochemical properties. And so we are actually building, organic chemists and in silico organic chemists to do these kind of things, right? It's just like we build our own machine learning expert, right? And so we trying to move the drug development as far as possible. So we have something that looks like a molecule, that looks like a drug, could be taken up. And then, it's predicted to increase lifespan. But then we have to go back into the wet lab and, synthesize the drug, and then feed the worms and see whether it's increasing lifespan or not. If not, then, that's the wrong prediction there. And then you just start going back. But that feeds back into it, right? And say, that was not the right thing. And so the machine is constantly learning and updating it, right? In a sense, to move these forward. And so usually this is a general approach a lot of people are taking to inform research or predict something which is hard to recognize as a human being. I mean, we're good at pattern recognition, but then it's just too complex. There are too many informations, right? And so that's one thing. And the other aspect is, for example, what I mentioned, the external matrix. in total, there are around 300 proteins that are outside the cell that make the matrix itself. And then there are another 700 that remodel the external matrix or associate with the matrix, or like, all these changes, right? And so if you have 1,000 genes out of your 20,000, right, things getting complicated. And so you, of course, use machine learning and see how, what are the predictions and where can we get new insight, is these genes or the interaction of those genes, is that important? And then we actually test these in the lab, always for aging or longevity or some mechanistic insights in that respect.
Deciphering the code of life seems to be a complex problem. So I think artificial intelligence helps, maybe is part of the solution, an important part of the solution. And also when that moves forward, probably it helps to create more know-how and knowledge. While you were talking, what I can imagine is your process that you're doing with your lab in drug discovery and also early stage drug development to take something and test it out and find out if it works. So to put it bluntly, when I look a little bit further down the development path towards clinical trials, I always wondered what would be endpoints in longevity and in aging. I heard from a friend in another podcast. He said, this would be very long trials. So basically, when you want to find out whether people can achieve 100 or 120 years of age with a special treatment, you say, okay, it's 50, 60 years. How do you see that?
Yeah, this is the major problem we're having at the moment, right? And it comes back to, is aging a disease or not, right? Because we don't have, the way for the drug development, you have to have a specific disease and a specific disease indication that gets improved, right? And so usually what's happening at the moment is that you find a drug that, increases lifespan, and then you figure out from the molecular mechanism where the drug has the primary effect of the drug would be, right? Where is the most effective? And then you choose your disease model and go into that, right? And lots of these startups that went in there, the biggest thing that's always happening that, they fail on the clinical trials because just, the primary outcome measures just didn't work out. And then the whole thing collapses. So this is the biggest worry. I think everybody who's going into those startups, you still learn. And again, lots of machine learning is used to find better measurements and to move forward. So there's a lot of things happening. And at the moment, this is also what my lab will trying to do, is to get some insights in how can we do better the clinical trials. And so we're working also with the ETH Clinical Trial Center and move this more up. Now, at the moment, there was just a couple of days ago a really cool paper in Impact Aging from Budskaya, and they used a supplement, I think alpha-glutarate, if I can mention that. And the way they designed it's not really a clinical trial, but it's like a retrospective study where they had around 42 participants, right? They gave them the drugs for the supplements for like 4 to 7 months. And they measured their epigenetic age before the intervention and then after the interventions. And remarkably, the epigenetic, clock as you know it, right? So we can predict your biological age versus your chronological age. So the cool thing was that actually it was an 8-year reduction in their biological age. So seeming that, with this intervention, it had an effect, at least on the epigenetic clock, right? But that really translates to hardcore physiology or other molecular change, and that is unknown. But at least the aging clock as we know it, the epigenetic clock, was reversed. And so I think that's our window at the moment to use these clocks, and then more and more clocks coming out to do an intervention, right? And then really see whether you are, so to speak, rejuvenated or that aspect is reversed. And I think there are much more other things that have to be read out, and placebo group, etc., and then including a trial. But I think now it is exciting that it's even something like that is even working, because it's still astonishing that just a short say 4 to 7 month intervention has such a big effect on aging, so to speak.
That's very interesting. There is this old proverb that is attributed to Hippocrates. Now I have it. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And what you said, I interpret it in a way that probably there is some truth in it. You were talking a lot about supplements. So when I hear supplements, I associate it with food. And basically the role of science then could be to analyze in certain foods or what's happening in nature, what really works in that, and how can we make that more effective, and how can we reinforce these processes so that you get a drug at the end of the day. Is this the right perspective?
No, I think it's the lowest hanging fruit, right? I mean, so these things, they're called caloric restriction mimetics, right? Because it should mimic all those molecular changes happening when you are fasting, right? And so, people are working. I mean, we also had another caloric restriction mimic paper out there which worked very nicely in C. elegans, and they also showed that there's some indication in mice. So yeah, I mean, the research is there. I mean, for yourself, I mean, the thing that works the best at the moment is, caloric, eat a little bit less, right? But also what we found out is it's not only, what you eat, right? And how much you eat, is also the timing. That's the last important part. And so the best thing is to have some starvation periods, because usually we were evolved, right? That we were like hungry, we had to hunt, we had something, we ate something, and then we were hungry again. So our physiology is better adapted to be starved than, a little bit starved, a little bit hungry, than have constant food. So that's the other thing you have to limit. And then it becomes, once we understand, we have some understanding, caloric restriction, I mean, been studying since the 1937, so to speak, right? So we have a good understanding what the molecular players is, what the timing is, what has to be done, what are the changes, right? And now the question is, can we find, some molecules that could trigger it? Because I don't know whether you ever tried to do those caloric restriction regimens. You have to be very disciplined, right? It requires to be disciplined like a monk, right? Which personally, I cannot do. I love life too much. I just love to eat. And so it would be better that we could have some interventions at the beginning that, you could do some fasting, but also you could have some supplements that would, reinitiate some key processes. I mean, we know there are a couple molecules that we lose just during aging, right? And really supplement meaning that we would supplement them to a younger state. And that would, of course, improve your aging or your health.
A lot of insights. I was just smiling because it reminded me of my time at the Shaolin Temple in China. And you're absolutely right. It's pretty easy to live a healthy lifestyle when you're a monk at the Shaolin Temple. You get up 4 o'clock in the morning, you meditate, then you train, then you get healthy nutrition, a lot of relaxing and exercising. And I think at latest 9 p.m. lights are off until 4 a.m. and starvation is integrated with exercising in the day. When I look at my life here in the Western world, it's pretty challenging. There is good food out there. So going to, let's say, fast food, McDonald's, or especially here in Vienna, cakes, which is, I think, also in Switzerland, probably one of the treats that everybody can access very easily, makes it more difficult to have the right choices, which leads me to the next question. I mean, you mentioned that in your vita that you are the president of the Swiss Society for Aging Research, and I assume that you also talk a lot with policymakers. Wouldn't that mean that we also, if we want to help people to age healthy, that we also need to do a lot on the policy side? What is the awareness of policymakers and the general population towards health research and healthy aging?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not there where it should be, right? I mean, it's just coming up more and more, right? Mm-hmm. The health awareness, it comes up from, as you mentioned, yes, you saw it in the startup business that, longevity is coming up more or less because it can be treated as a business. But the same thing is, we see that with our pension funds and things like that. We know that for a long time that it's not sustainable. We need to change something, and also what the healthcare costs are from that side. It's coming in, but what is not really known is that we can actually do something about it, right? We see this silver tsunami coming up at the moment, and it looks all bad. But what people are not really aware of it is that we have some molecular insights. The science has been working on it for the last 20 to 30 years, right? And we could utilize that knowledge. And so things that are for me like old news. I know this things for 10 years ago. I talked to a medical doctor, and for them there's just this is all new, right? And then if you from the practitioner, right, the medical doctor who also sees you on a regular basis, if they're starting to learn this, right, and then everybody's starting to learn this. I think it's one job of the scientists to really inform, we all know we have that problem, right? It's one of our biggest problems, or challenging problems that we are facing soon, especially the younger generations. But, there are a lot of things going on. But the problem is that lots of scientists, are not really outspoken, right? They don't want to talk. Not that they want to, they're focused on science, right? Let's put it this way, right? Science is fun.
It's their job.
Yeah. And so, but there needs to be some education and something like that. And so one reason why I founded the Swiss Society for Aging Research is, first of all, to bring all those scientists together to see we're not working in silos, right? There are other people working on that problem, right? And then to start informing also these kind of things and have some platform to move forward and also answer questions. And then the idea is then to come from the academic side, right? To be there to, answer questions and help building up stuff, right? From the business side, there's going to be like a Swiss longevity value to trying to build up, right? And so, this is important to move forwards. And then coming to the politician, I think, and the policymakers, that is going to be difficult. One challenge we had with the WHO, there was, I think 2017 or 16, or 15, it was not in their program in there anymore, right? And so our society, and then the German, and the one in England, all the society wrote and said, you have to have aging as in your program, otherwise it's not going to be addressed. And so luckily they put it back onto the agenda, right? And it's more in the healthcare system, and how helping elderly people and integrating them, right, and how help they're not losing so much life quality. But what is missing is all the preventative things we could do already before it gets there, right? At the moment, we're very responsive. And so the key question, and that needs a lot of politicians and people from the public in there, lots of smart people, to how can we actually do these, preventative things, lifestyle changes, or coming from the medical field, or, even these supplements, or even these changes. Sometimes it's as simple as, have a starvation period as a patient before an operation, because the outcome is much better, right? And these kind of things have to change. And it also has to reach the people, because not aware, right? As I mentioned before, I was so surprised. Before the corona epidemic, if I talked about mRNA, what is this, right? And now they know, right? So I'm hoping that we find some way to also educate people, the public, to understand there's a biology of aging going on, and we can do something about it.
I think the internet can play a crucial role here in dissemination of information. What I read recently was that probably my expectation to become a centenarian declined a little bit. From the United States, I saw a study where they stated that the average lifespan is declining again. So probably caused by the lifestyle in the Western world. and raising awareness in that direction would be probably helpful to reverse the process. My question to you is, do you perceive similar developments like this one study I read, that the lifespan is declining again in some areas?
I can not really for Switzerland, not really. I think the life expectancy, I mean, we're second place after Japan.
Yeah.
That increased. But what I can say is that, we see this, 20 years ago, at least for kids, right? I didn't see any obese kids in Switzerland. Then I went to the US. I spent 10 years in the US, and I saw a lot of obese kids there. And coming back, I see now more and more, obese kids, meaning that their lifespan, their lifestyle, what they're eating is not correct. And so usually that's not due to the kids. It's usually the parents that should, be a little bit more educated and have some more healthy snacks or healthy things in there, right? And so there could be a lot of things done with lifestyle changes, what we eat, how we eat, and these things, because it's just, it's at the moment it's almost too good. You can go and get a Snickers or dairy sugar, these kind of things. Yeah. I mean, there are things trying to be done to tax sugars and these kind of things, but I think again it boils down to education and having a healthier lifespan. And also like the healthcare system, things have to change. And so also some innovative things, because, meaning that we have soon more elderly people than young people, right? So things have to change. And I think also it has to, again, change with integrating them a little bit better. I mean, the pension fund, the age, at least in Switzerland and other places, set to 65. And the original reason was because the life expectancy at that time was 66. So meaning you work till one day before you die, technically, statistically, right? And you have 1 year to enjoy whatever hard work you put in there, right? But now, I mean, it's another almost 20 years, right? Where you're going to be retired. So things have to change in that kind of things, also how we work and how we integrate it. Maybe we have to do something that you take sabbaticals, you work for a couple of years and then you take a half year off or learn something new, right? So I think the system there also has to change because, and have it more people integrated, right? Because you could see this with these blue zones where people are very social, they keep working, they eat less, right, and they live also longer, and they have a very healthy lifespan, and then in these communities. And when you take those people out, and some of them migrate to the US or to Europe, right, they don't live much longer because it's just a lifestyle change, right? So there could be a lot of things done in that kind of sense.
Yeah, I agree to that. I think expectation management by policymakers can change a lot. I mean, we see that in the last 2 years when there is the right intention from politics, a lot of things move very quickly. And what you mentioned, that the models that we have established in our pension system date back, I think, right after World War II. And now people expect to be retired for 2 or 3 decades. And maybe when that changes, we have a little bit less stress on the social insurance system here in Europe, because when only a few people pay in and when the young generation spends more time on universities, I think the working life is just shrinking to 2 decades. And where should all the taxes come from?
Exactly. I mean, and also what you do when you're old, right? I mean, there's not much, also the awareness has to change, right? And to integrate it. I mean, for example, my mother, when she got retired, she went back to university, studied psychology, and had her own, praxis to treat people, right, from the psychology side. And so it was just a second career, right, just do something second. And it would be cool if we had some more, things like that, so they can, educate again, do something really new, and then move forward, and then integrate it again into society to make an impact and helpful. And and also that they can choose not to work every day, but I don't know, 30%, 70%, depending on how much they want, but it's still a valuable contribution.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What I like on the internet, so the nice thing is with elderly people, they have all the life experience. And when I just think back when I was 20, it was really challenging to figure out what is the right way to move forward. And back then, my approach was to just become a member of management clubs, or clubs where elderly people with life experience mingle with the young generation, so that both sides can share their perception of life. And I learned a lot from people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And what I realized with the internet, that especially on YouTube, many elderly people use the channel to spread their life experience. And the great thing is YouTube has a business model built in. So people just need to sit down, talk about their life, upload the videos, and over time they can create income streams with that. And when politicians would push more in that direction to make people aware of such new models, I think a lot is possible also for people above 65, 70.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's actually very nice to hear. So yeah, and there are things, challenge and opening, right? And some new innovative things, right? And again, as you mentioned, it's like how can we inform everybody that these things are possible to do?
I think my solution is podcasts. So let's just sit down, talk about it, spread the message, and help people reach a wider audience. Let me ask you one final question. You had a great career, or you are in the middle of a great career, let's say it this way. And you work a lot with students. And when I think back in my 20s, when I was 20, one question was, how can I make an impact? What should I do to move forward in a way that I create value for society? And I would be interested in your answer. So when young people come to you and say, what can they do to change something in the world? I mean, it sometimes looks confusing. There is so much going on and so little we can do. What is your advice to someone who wants to create lasting change?
Yeah, first of all, the person itself has to figure out what really excites them, right? Is it, going into business, going into different things? And if the person is excited about science and research, right, then you have to figure out what excites you most. So it's a little bit self-reflection, what you really want, which is a hard question when you're young, of course, but then also try different things, right? And so I would say just, try for a little bit. And if you say that's not working, then just don't stick with it. So just try then something new. This is all fine. Now, when I was young, I wanted to do aging research, right? And I've started with those labs, and in the beginning, it was not really accepted, so people were laughing at us, right? So we're doing this, aging research, but nowadays it's much better, and now it gets, for me personally, seeing the development, it gets really excited in the aging space, because as I mentioned, not all of the young minds become professors, but you could do actually startups or anything like that. And nowadays there are lots of programs that help actually people in academia, right, or from the business side to develop those startups just in the aging space, right? So I'm taking my time also mentoring on deck longevity biotech kind of thing development, which is very nice with different talks. And as you mentioned, with the internet, it makes it much easier, right? The accessibility to find the community. So the second tip I want to give is to find the community where what you want to do is actually happening, and you get all these stimulating inputs and surrounding, right? Because, if you surround yourself with the right people, it's so much more fun and you learn a lot, right? For myself, I really loved my time in Boston, being at Harvard, right? It was just like such a vibrant environment, so much fun to do science. And the key thing is, it's just, you have to have fun what you're doing, because otherwise it's not worth putting up with all these different things that are not fun and hard. And if you don't find the passion, what you want to do, you will give up, right? Because there's, nothing is perfect. There's always one or two things that you really hate to do, and you have to push yourself through in order to move forward. So again, find something that you're passionate about it, and surround you with the right people, get expert opinions, and then just try it. And one thing I want to mention, especially for the people in Europe, right? We always look at failure, failure is something bad. And, it's what you have to accept is it's totally okay to fail. You just gain experience. It just feels hard and it hurts maybe, but if you change that mindset, then it's just like, at least I tried. You only fail if you don't try, right? And just, I think we live, at least in Switzerland, you live in a very nice environment. And if you fail, it's not that you're going to be on the street, right? You will find something else to do, right? So you have the luxury to fail in another sense.
Sound advice. Was joking with a friend yesterday. So I think the old model was for man, build a house, have a child, plant a tree. And what I realized also with what you said is, yes, true, but find your passion first. So look at what you love doing and what you can think about spending the rest of your life with it. And if it doesn't work out, just move on, try another thing when you're young. So you have the freedom to do so. And the second thing that I'm taking with me from what you said right now is this failure or a culture of success, like another friend calls it. I think this is the reason why scientists make really great entrepreneurs. And I understand science in a way that failure is just something that makes scientists move forward quicker. So from one failure to the next. And this is the way how they create success. And whenever I talked with scientists, they were not really worried about that. This didn't work. Okay, let's try the next thing. And this spirit, I think, also helps creating great companies.
Yeah, to add that one with the scientists, what we, at least our lab, always asking, what would be the killer experiment? The idea we have, how can we make sure, like, how could we not destroy it is the wrong word, right? So, but kill it, right? In a sense. So in the end, it's like, when you fail fast, right? So what is the thing we need to do first that we know if thing is not going to have, if the bubble is going to burst, right? We want to burst it really fast. And the other thing I want to add to you, what also changed is I think it's not one career path anymore per lifetime, right? I think that changed, that my parents had one career path and even my mother changed it in this kind of way. I think, the cool thing nowadays with the accessibility, with the, as you mentioned, the internet to learn new things, right? Is that you can evolve and change and just do something completely different, right? And all you need to do is put the extra energy in there to go and learn and study, and so you can do the career change. Again, it's going to be easy if that's your passion.
That's absolutely true. Today when I want to start something new or learn a new skill, I can start so easily with the internet, just the first steps. It's not the end point. Going back into the 90s, it meant traveling somewhere to meet the right people. And traveling sometimes was really expensive back then. And people who didn't come from money sometimes had real limitations to find these initial steps to move to a different environment. And now in 2021, go online, you find all you need there. It's great.
Yeah, that's right. It's right on your fingertip. You keep mentioning back in the days. The first study about the doubling lifespan, I went to the library, right? I digged up the paper, right, and I read it there, and then I was so amazed, and I just like I had it, and I really wanted to keep it, so I wanted to the photocopying, right? Photocopying something is just, and then I really wanted that paper, but I didn't get it. I mean, nowadays you could either online or even if you go to the library, you could use your phone just to click and you have it, right?
Amazing how technology advanced in only 2 decades. I really love it. Collin, is there anything open that you would like to address in this podcast?
No, not really. I want to thank you. I think you do a fantastic job to spread the word, right, and reach people and give some food for thoughts, right, and ignite new things, and also then that will also bring people together. So I think this is really fantastic what you're doing here, and also bringing innovation to the living room, so to speak, or to wherever the person is, right? Or person is maybe running outside listening to your podcast. And, it's just, the cool thing is that, your brain is always changing and learning something new. So just listening to this podcast, I'm sure everybody's brain just changed and they learned something, hopefully.
I absolutely believe that. I love your passion and the way you make science understandable for non-scientists is really a great skill. And I wish you and your team all the best. And let's stay in touch. I would be curious to see how quickly your science evolves into products.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.